commonplace interpretation of Willy Loman, the central character in Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, is that his is the story of an old man gone senile, experiencing psychological breakdown that causes turmoil in his family and culminates in him taking his own life. This is a fundamentally individualist interpretation, and it limits the scope of analysis so tightly to the surface that it misses key dynamics that the play more or less explicitly explores. This individualist interpretation also seems to stem from, or produce, a lack of sympathy for the character, as if Willy is somehow the villain of the story, when actually Willy is perhaps the story's ultimate victim. He's the quintessential figure of the broken proletariat, who has internalized the system that oppresses him, and his story is all about capitalist ideology. Capitalist ideology has really taken a firm hold on Willy's mind, as evidenced by the way he perpetually needs to justify the system.
Well, people have to move somewhere.
No, there's more people now.
No, I don't think there's more people.
There's more people! That's what's ruining this country! Population is getting out of control! The competition is maddening!
He must blame other individuals for the problems the system has caused, because if his blame were properly directed to that system, his perspective would crumble, and he would have to reconstruct his entire worldview.
Figure it out. Work a lifetime to pay off a house. You finally own it. There's nobody living.
Well, life's a casting off, dear. It's always that way.
No, some people accomplish something.
These people are, of course, capitalists in the class sense, who do not need to work their entire lives the way that Willy does. Willy desperately wants to become this ideal vision of a man that he holds in his mind, but without the class analysis, he still believes it is possible with personality.
I mean, Bernard could get the best marks in school, you understand, but when he gets out to the business world, you understand, you're gonna be 5 times ahead of him. That's why I thank Almighty God you both built like Adonis. Because the man who makes an appearance in the business world, the man who creates personal interest, is the man who gets ahead. Be liked, and you will never want.
While not falling for the myth that education can get anyone anywhere, he does fall for the myth of personal appeal, completely missing the fact that it's really the man who owns something who gets further ahead than any man he employs, no matter how much personal interest these men create. Willy's ideology is most explicitly revealed in the scene where he's talking to Howard, his boss. From the start of the conversation, Howard's disrespect for Willy is clear to see. He talks past him, ignores what he says, hushes him, and interrupts him, all while Willy listens to him, compliments him, and even lies to him in order to move the conversation more smoothly.
This is the most fascinating relaxation I ever found.
I think I'll get one myself.
Sure, they're only $150. You can't do without it.
Willy obviously can't afford that, and Howard is so obliviously affluent that he assumes he can. After Howard shoots down Willy's request for a job in town, Willy says he only needs $65 a week for his family. As the conversation goes on, he lowers his amount once to $50 a week, and then again to $40. He's willing to lower his standard of living just to keep a job, just to survive, because that is the class position he is in, while Howard is willing to continually deny him of this, no matter how low he goes, because that is the class position he is in. This is the conflict between worker and boss. And what is Howard's justification for this? Business is business, and everybody's gotta pull his own weight. As if there was simply nothing he could do for him, and no other way for things to be.
I put 34 years into this firm, Howard, and now I can't pay my insurance. You can't eat the orange and throw the peel away. A man is not a piece of fruit.
That is exactly what the system has done to him. Howard responds to this by attempting to deny his accomplishments, and then by telling him,
Pull yourself together. I'll be back in a little while.
pull yourself together, meaning get back in your place and don't complain. Still, Willy says,
Oh my God. I was yelling at her.
he's guilty for standing up for himself after being exploited for so long, showing that he has entirely internalized the system that oppresses him.
You know, the trouble is, Linda, people don't seem to take to me.
Oh, don't be so foolish.
I know it when I walk in. They seem to laugh at me.
Why? Why would they laugh at you? Don't talk like that.
I don't know the reason for it, but they just pass me by and I notice.
He doesn't feel valued, and it's no wonder he feels this way. He is alienated. It doesn't matter that he worked his whole life for the company. It doesn't matter how little he's willing to work for. And it certainly doesn't matter how tired he's grown after his decades of toil. He is just one of many disposable cogs in the machine, and the machine has now disposed of him. Linda is the character with the most insight into Willie's condition.
The man is exhausted.
Sure.
A small man can be just as exhausted as a great man. He works for a company. 36 years this March. He opens up unheard of territories to their trademark, and now, in his old age, they take his salary away. And what goes through a man's mind? Driving 700 miles home without having earned a cent. Why shouldn't he talk to himself? Why not? When he has to go to Charlie every week and borrow $50 from him and pretend to me it's his pay. Now, how long can that go on? How long? And you tell me he has no character? The man who never worked a day in his life but for your benefit. And when does he get the medal for that?
She knows that the system is to blame for Willie's mental state. The underlying piece that the characters miss is that who she describes as small men are really workers here, while who she describes as great men are owners. Our so-called small men are really bound to be more exhausted than our so-called great men.
I am not saying he's a great man. Willie Loman never earned a lot of money. His name was never in the paper. He's not the finest character that ever lived.
She's also describing everything that Willie always wanted to be. The owner class takes home the majority of the wealth, and with wealth you can see your name not only in the paper, but plastered on whatever it is you buy and own, and the reputation of your character is elevated as you have less stress and more time for etiquette, not to mention the fact that with wealth, no one will want to cross you and you can practically buy a fine character. But Willie belongs to the working class, and his tragedy is that of the worker. He spends his life wanting to be like the owners, toiling away at their behest even when they pay him nothing, naively admiring them, as if they're somehow better than him, all while the fundamental class divide that creates this situation in the first place is left obscured and unknown to him as he literally deteriorates away into nothing. And Willie does admire the capitalist class. His respect for Howard extends so far that it causes him to deeply disrespect himself, as delineated before. He's desperate to impress his much wealthier brother Ben as well.
Oh, business is bad. It's murderous. But not for me, of course.
Even though it was, in a sense, the structure of business that murdered him. He spent his life chasing a capitalist definition of success, which capitalism itself denied him of, and so the only way left to achieve it was death. This tragedy began in Willie's life with the denial of his dreams. Willie wanted to work with his hands, but he followed in his father's footsteps as a salesman because that was the clearest way to make money and status for himself. And the worker must take what work makes money in order to survive under capitalism. We see little hints of Willie's dreams still showing themselves throughout the play.
On the way home tonight, I'd like to buy some seeds.
Oh, well, that's wonderful, dear, but not enough sun gets back there. Nothing will grow back there.
The seeds won't grow in that soil, just like his dreams won't come to fruition under capitalism. Biff shares these dreams with his father, wanting to work with his hands and forego the business world entirely.
Screw the
Happy.
business world.
Right, screw him. Great, but cover
I
yourself.
don't care what they think. They have laughed at Dad for years. And you know why? Because we don't belong in this nut house of the city. We should be mixing cement somewhere on some open plain or carpenters. A carpenter is allowed to whistle.
Biff wants him and his father to own their own labor and be unrestricted by the social norms of business culture. He knows he doesn't fit in business, and he says this as no one who wants to retain their sense of joy and spirit untempered by corporate culture does. He's at odds with what the system, and by extension his father, who's been ideologically possessed by the system, expect of him. This brings us to analyze how capitalism is really partly the force behind the familial conflict. It is not some inner maliciousness that causes Willie to mistreat his family. His abuses stem from his stresses. He's described as beaten down and guilt-ridden after exploding at Linda.
About my darling.
My foundation and my support.
It's clear that he loves her on some level. In Willie's memory states, we see his idealized picture of Biff, who's not only a son who loves him, but practically the picture of the ideal CEO.
Wait,
You better go down and tell him what to do, Biff.
the way they obey him.
Right after yelling at Biff for losing a job by whistling in an elevator, he switches right back to praising him once he reveals that he's going to see Bill Oliver in the morning. In other words, once he fits into his own internalized, oppressive standard and vision of success.
He is finding himself, Willie.
Not finding yourself at the age of 34 is a disgrace. The trouble is, he's lazy. Biff is a lazy
They are sleeping.
bum.
Go down.
Of course, this isn't true. Not finding yourself, or finding a job in this case, at the age of 34 is only disgraceful from a capitalist viewpoint. And the trouble isn't that he's lazy. The trouble is that his desires are incompatible with what the system and his father it possesses expect of him.
I put 34 years into this firm, Howard, and now I can't pay my insurance. You can't eat the orange and throw the peel away. A man is not a piece of fruit.